some very surprising news, in a sense, from Iraq. As instability grips the region, the Prime Minister asking the Parliament to declare a state of emergency that has been declared in the city of Mosul, that city overtaken by opposition forces. And this comes on the heels of car bombings over the weekend, which killed more than 60. Joining us now to talk about what is transpiring in Iraq, my old congressional colleague, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra. Pete, we thank you for joining us this morning. Mosul, one of the places I visited 1 year into the conflict. It's supposed to be the city believed to be the ancient city of Nineveh, where in the Bible Jonah paid a visit. Right now, there are serious problems in and around Mosul.
That's exactly right, JD, but there are problems throughout Iraq. If you take a look at the places where there have been attacks in the last few days, in the last few weeks, they range from a city that we all know well, Fallujah, which is under control of Islamist extremists. Lots of attacks in Baghdad. Now you've got the attack in Mosul. And there are also now more attacks in the Kurdish region, Kurdistan, the northern part of Iraq. So the Sunni extremists, the radical extremists, the jihadists, they've really got free reign in Iraq, and the level of violence there is matching the peak before the surge back in 2006, 2007.
And of course, there was a surge because there was an American military there. Now our presence is drawn down, for all intents and purposes, so significantly reduced. There's no real way to have an American response, nor is the mood of the American people to have anything to happen. So I guess the question is, what happens next in Iraq, Pete?
Well, I think, you've got a number of scenarios. You've got, number one, how do you deal with the extremists, the Sunnis and the Shias fighting each other in Iraq? And I think for the foreseeable future, that is going to continue. The current military structure coming out of Baghdad, the central government isn't strong enough to tap down and to overwhelm the Sunni extremists. So that fighting, I think, is going to continue. Kurdistan, the Kurdish region, they are going to continue to push for more and more autonomy. You know you're in trouble when the central government in Baghdad threatens to take the northern part of the country to the UN to confront them with the oil that is being shipped out of the Kurdish region. So that's a problem. I think you're going to continue to see instability, but I think you need to go back to the roots. The roots of the problem here are that, the U.S., when we left absolutely no footprint. We left the Iraqi central government totally on their own. We couldn't coach them on how to govern. We couldn't help them to maintain stability and control in Iraq. And so the whole thing has basically disintegrated.
Well, that's when I hear the word disintegration, that is a profound observation, because you think of the American blood spilled in Iraq, and now the situation that exists there today. It's very, very troubling. Elsewhere in the region, more problems in Pakistan. For the second time in 3 days, another attack at Pakistan's busiest airport, there in Karachi. And this second attack obviously did not have the same effect as the first. A couple of guys on a motorcycle coming in and exchanging fire. Yet the Pakistani Taliban bragging about it on a Twitter account. They say there's going to be full-scale civil war in Pakistan. What is your take this morning on what's going on there?
Well, I mean, it's going to take a lot to get to a full civil war in Pakistan. But clearly what you have is, again, you've got a radical extremist group, the Taliban. We've all heard a lot about the Taliban in the last week to 10 days with the release and transfer of prisoners between the United States and the Taliban. And, the administration keeps talking about, well, this may provide a pathway and a path forward to have negotiations with the Taliban. Take a look at what happened with the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis elected a new president roughly 2 years ago. The strategy was, let's negotiate with the Taliban. We can reach a peaceful accord with them, and we can all move forward constructively. A year and a half, 2 years later, the Taliban is attacking. You can't negotiate with these folks. They're attacking across the country. They have it's interesting. The Taliban that the Pakistanis want to get, they have a safe haven in Afghanistan, and theoretically, the ones that the Afghan government and the U.S. wants to get, they have a safe haven in Pakistan. The bottom line is the border region between the Pak-Afghan border is a ungoverned area, and it is a safe haven for the Taliban, whether they want to attack and undermine the Afghan government or whether they want to undermine the Pakistani government. They have a tremendous reach throughout both of those countries to create continuing turmoil and problems for both of those governments.
And not only is there freedom of movement for these insurgent forces across the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, there's also the free flow of information. Pete, in your mind, does the prisoner swap Bergdahl for the Taliban 5, how much of that on both sides of the border is contributing to the Taliban's resurgence?
Well, I don't think any one event is going to, really lead to their resurgence. But the bottom, for a long time, the Taliban in Pakistan, they were actually supported by the Pakistani government to create unrest in in India and in Afghanistan. They used the Taliban, and years later what has happened is the Taliban has turned on them. But because you have these close connections or former connections between the Taliban and the Pakistani government, when I thought where you were going with the free flow of information is that the Pakistani intelligence service and the Pakistani military are totally compromised by the Taliban. So the Taliban know if the Pak government is going to be planning some kind of action, some kind of attacks, or some kind of reaction against them, they've got a heads up before it ever happens.
So they have insiders there, and that sounds like a country geographically far from either Pakistan or Afghanistan, and that would be Nigeria. When you take a look at what is going on in Nigeria, apparently Boko Haram has kidnapped an additional 20 schoolgirls. This latest abduction, Pete, I guess it typifies a lack of progress and protection, and what was the cause célèbre of 2 weeks ago has faded into the background about hashtag bring back our girls. Again, America a bystander and Nigeria ineffectual?
Absolutely. The 270 girls that have been hostage now, I think we're in day 56, day 57 of that hostage taking with no end in sight. Sometimes when you hear nothing, you become optimistic in that you think that something may be happening and that there's a reason why there's a lockdown on information. I'm not quite that optimistic on this because of the other activities now of Boko Haram with the additional kidnapping of 20 more women. But also, if you take a look at what's happening in northern Nigeria, it's not only the kidnapping, but there are ongoing murders, ongoing attacks throughout this part of Nigeria. The Nigerian military, their reach into these areas to provide some type of security for the civilians up there really is not much of a reach at all. And so that's a huge problem. But, it shows now, we've talked about, like you said, three very different parts of the world, and the reach of radical jihadists and extremists from Iraq to Afghanistan to Pakistan into Africa. The threat is real, and within each of these countries, there will be groups that are going to be planning and plotting the ultimate attack, which is another attack against the United States or our interest in Europe.
And Pete, with a minute remaining, while all these trouble spots around the world are erupting again, stateside, the CIA has joined Twitter, and the first tweet of the agency says what I guess we can neither confirm nor deny. This is our first tweet.
Yes,
Is this what our intelligence gatherers should be involved in, Pete? I have about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, we were much better when our intelligence community was back in the shadows, when NSA stood for no such agency. We don't need to bring these things into the social media world. Keep intelligence agencies are supposed to have a cloak of secrecy around them. Let's put the cloak of secrecy around them and have people wonder what they do, rather than try to move them into the social media and being on the cutting edge for communicating with the public.
Pete Hoekstra, we thank you. We may not want the CIA to tweet, but what do you think? Why don't you let us know? You can reach us at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum.